gentlemen, a conversation about China's puppets in South Korea and Hong Kong. Please welcome your panel. From the American Conservative Union Foundation Board, Gordon Chang. From KCPAC, Grant Newsham. And your moderator, attorney Lydia Chang.
Good morning, CPAC. Good morning. It is great to be among patriots, among people like you who cherish liberty. But across the Pacific, in both South Korea and Hong Kong, liberty is under attack. I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up there. That's where Gordon and I met when he came to Hong Kong to work. It was a vibrant city, a fun place. But this morning, we woke up to the news that the Hong Kong government has arrested another 47 democracy activists, on top of the thousands they've arrested in the last few months. So Gordon, what is happening to that city that you and I both love so dearly?
China's really taking over Hong Kong, and it's removing and eliminating every vestige of opposition. Now, China promised 50 years of a high degree of autonomy. This is under the one country, two systems formula, but recently what they have been doing is jailing people, including Jimmy Lai and a number of others who are important activists, and they've been preventing opposition candidates from running in elections. They've been instituting what they call patriotic education. So really, this is the end of Hong Kong as we know it.
Well, that's what communism is. It is against life, against liberty, against freedom. And the only thing they can do is coercion and repression. The American Conservative Union is the first foreign organization to go to Hong Kong. We went in August 2019 to stand with the protesters there. Mash Slab, Dan Schneider, Veronica Birkenstock, and Zach Crandall, we were all there. And the ACU is also in South Korea. We have 3 KCPACs, and we have a lot of South Korean patriots here today with us. But Grant, South Korea is fast becoming an authoritarian state. What is President Moon Jae-in doing there?
You know, that's something nobody expected, particularly people who have a long history with South Korea, know about it. We've always thought of it as a free country like us, with all the rights that everyone has. What you're seeing is the administration of President Moon Jae-in making a systematic effort to turn South Korea into a one-party state. They're strangling individual liberty, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, etc. And it's something that many people find very hard to believe what is happening before their own eyes.
Yeah, it was such a vibrant democracy. On April 15, there was a General Assembly election in South Korea.
Yes.
What happened there, and what did China do there?
Well, they had an election for their Congress, and what happened was the Moon administration, their party, won an overwhelming victory, and it gave them the ability to pass any legislation through the National Assembly, but also with 3 more votes to change the Constitution. And elections happen, and sometimes the results aren't what you expect, but this was one.
We do know that, don't we?
But there was so many irregularities here in that election that one had to conclude that it was rigged. And I went in as a skeptic, but came out believing that, yes, indeed, this was rigged.
Because you spent a lot of time in South Korea in the last few months investigating that, right?
That's right. And once you look at the evidence, and there's a compelling case, if not conclusive case, that it was a rigged election. How was China involved? Well, it's in their interest to dominate South Korea. And they have compelling evidence of electronic manipulation of the voting systems there. But the thing to remember is that they have willing participants. The Moon administration is actually, one has to conclude, pro-China and even pro-North Korea, and not so much pro-United States.
Yeah, you once told me that, well, we don't know if Moon is a communist or not, but one thing we do know is he's very anti-America. Because you told me that he wrote about how he was so happy that America lost the Vietnam War. But a lot of South Koreans, most South Koreans, still remember the sacrifices that America made during the Korean War. So is Moon anti-Americanism just him, or is it a reflection of his generation?
I think what it reflects is him and a very close group of cronies, or a coterie of what amount to our equivalent of 60s radicals. These aren't just leftists or socialists, these are the extreme radicals.
And we do know something about radicals and leftists, don't we?
But a small group of committed radicals with a vision and are vague about their actual objectives and are ruthless enough can shift a country where most people don't want to go. Most South Koreans don't favor what he favors, which is the United States off the peninsula, South Korea aligned with, or unified with North Korea and looking more like North Korea and aligning the country with China. I think most Koreans don't agree with that. But it's a very dangerous thing, and we've seen how a country can shift even where the majority of people don't want to go.
So Gordon, what does China want on the Korean Peninsula? What is their objective there?
Well, China's always been anti-American, so they want our troops off the peninsula. They want our influence eliminated there. And indeed, Grant talks about a unified Korea. Basically, North Korea will take over South Korea. And a lot of people think that that's just impossible to happen because North Korea is destitute and South Korea is so prosperous and advanced. But it's a prosperous and advanced society run by leftists. And China is going to do everything possible, including rigging that April 15th election that you talked about, Grant.
I think so. And that is, China is all about breaking alliances. And you see it in South Korea, you see it in Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan. That's their MO, is to try and split the United States alliances that have maintained peace and basically freedom in the Pacific region for a long time. And you're seeing that at work in South Korea, And the MOs, the way they do is a little different in every place. But given that the Moon administration has people who, by their own word, back and look at them, are effectively pro-China, pro-North Korea, it makes it easier for China to do its work. But as I said, a large part of the population does not support this. So it's not a done deal just yet, but it is dangerous.
See, that's something I don't understand. I know that China wants to split alliances, right? But what's happening in Hong Kong? Hong Kong was supposed to be an example for Taiwan. It was supposed to be, okay, Hong Kong can come back and into the motherland, and so Taiwan, you should be happy, you should be not worried about anything. And now what they're doing in Hong Kong is actually energizing the pro-independence movement in Taiwan. So isn't that counterproductive for the CCP?
Yeah, it certainly is counterproductive because the one country, two systems formula that is supposed to be in place in Hong Kong was originally developed by Deng Xiaoping, a former Chinese leader, for Taiwan. And what's occurred, especially in 2019, is the pro-independence, the green forces as they're called, have really become much more stronger. They actually won an election that everyone thought that they were going to lose. And that really means that Taiwan is now charting its own path away from China. That's a great thing for freedom and democracy. And it's a great thing for the United States because Taiwan is absolutely essential to the defense of the US. Our Western defense perimeter includes Taiwan, which is at the center of it. So this is important for you and me and all Americans.
That's why you always say defending Taiwan is defending America. So we have a mutual defense treaty with South Korea. We have one with Japan. You spend a lot of time in Japan too. What does Japan see all of this? What's happening in South Korea and what is happening in Hong Kong? How does Tokyo see this?
Well, the Japanese, they never let on just how scared they are. That's their nature, but they are terrified by what might happen, particularly on the Korean Peninsula. There's historic baggage and there's no love lost in some quarters, and they are concerned that a unified Korean Peninsula might actually, particularly aligned with China, might actually turn its attentions on Japan. Also, they see what has happened in Hong Kong, and it reminds the Japanese that they do not want to be dominated or taken over. But Japan does need to do more to defend itself. But they see exactly what's going on, but they're very coy about it, and they're, I would say, scared to death.
That's also another thing about how counterproductive the CCP has been. Because now there's a Quad, and I know that we've talked about the Quad yesterday here and in our breakout sessions. But Gordon, can you just talk a little bit about the Quad, Japan, South Korea, India, and the United States?
Yeah, this is a grouping of those four countries that are trying to protect themselves from China. And indeed, President Trump had a great relationship with former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Right now with President Biden, I think the Japanese are very concerned about what's happening because they don't know what's going on. And indeed, they've got a new leader, Prime Minister Suga, who is quite soft on China. So this is a real concern because the Quad is really the main way we're going to protect ourselves in Asia.
Is a concern, but don't you think that what President Trump has put in place, they have operationalized the Quad, that is something that is going to last?
I think that it will last because it makes sense and countries are being forced to do something they don't want to do in the region. And that is, they always wanted to have really good relations with Beijing, friendly relations, but you can't do that because China's been so hostile. So China will force the Quad to become an even stronger alliance. It's not a technical, formal military alliance, but it actually works much closer together than, for instance, NATO, which is a formal alliance.
And you look at the Quad countries, and you go throughout Asia, you'll find there's a difference between elite thinking and public thinking.
Yes.
And the publics are generally overwhelmingly anti-PRC. And the elite class is flexible on the matter sometimes. But you do see that, and that is a strength that the Quad has, is that you have huge public support for the idea of standing up to the PRC, and everyone wants the Americans to particularly play a role in it.
That's why people are smart and governments are dumb.
Yeah.
So what is happening in South Korea and Hong Kong, what the CCP is doing there, it's a real warning to us, isn't it, Gordon?
It certainly is. And in the few moments we have left, the important thing for us is to make sure that we keep our alliances and our partnerships in Asia strong, that we continue the initiatives of the Trump administration, and that you and me and everybody make sure that we pressure our government, which doesn't really want to confront China, but we've got to force it to do so for our own protection.
It looks grim. The CCP is a real threat, is an existential threat.
And someone just gave me a button which says, #CCP not for me.
Yes. And it is true that the governments in South Korea and Hong Kong are Chinese puppets. But the people of South Korea and the people of Hong Kong understands that America is a hope. And that is why when they took to the streets to protest, what did they do? They flew our flag and they sang our anthem because they know what America stands for.
Sacrifice us through the perilous fight.
Thank you all.
Everybody, let's shout it so that people in Hong Kong and South Korea can hear us. USA! USA! USA!
Thank you all.
USA!